Everyone. I hope you're doing well. Um, just wanted to make a video about something I've been thinking about for a while, but haven't yet found the precise words to articulate it. And, this has to do with really an age-old question that's been tossed around among philosophers and theologians, such as Leibniz and others for centuries. Namely, whether the world we're living in, whether the world of the actual creation, can be considered the best of all possible worlds. Now, before we go on, just wanted to remind you to hit the like button if you enjoyed this content, and if you want to see me make more of it, or if you want to help me make more of it, consider becoming a patron. For as little as $5 a month, you get exclusive Q&A, unlimited Q&A, exclusive streams, articles, things like that. There's more details of that in the description. But anyway, as I was saying, this best of all worlds idea or postulate, it's often put forward when trying to solve the problem of evil, but it's also not exclusively limited to that topic. But I think most fundamentally, underneath it all, it really has to do with whether God's infinite wisdom, generosity, love, power, whether all of that is compatible with a world that has much to be desired. Just in general, not even considering all the seemingly or apparent gratuitous evil that goes on. Just a world that has much to be desired. And so, but what does this have to do with Jesus, as the title would suggest? Well, first things first, following Thomas Aquinas, I do absolutely hold that it cannot be maintained that God is in any way compelled to bring about the best of all possible worlds in the created order. This would be a clear violation of divine sovereignty, which logically follows upon him being pure actuality. As pure act, he can't be affected or moved by anything. He's impassible. And so this would put him, if this were true, this would put him in some state of potentiality relative to some higher act or perfection, which would essentially compel us to posit some God beyond God in order to evade another infinite regress of reductions of potency to actuality. Um, so we're not I'm not holding to that idea. And moreover, this very concept of the best of all possible world scenario, just purely on the side of creation, purely on the side of the created order, there's a good argument to be made that it would basically amount to metaphysical impossibility or an absurdity. For the finite order, the order in which we live and move and have our being, increases in perfection can always be found wanting. And if this wasn't the case, then there could be no truly finite creation at all. And the only reality that would really exist is God, the infinite plenitude of perfection itself. If you strip away all sources of limitation, ultimately you will arrive at God Himself. So, on that level, I think the answer is pretty straightforward. From a Thomistic standpoint, from a Catholic standpoint, and yet, and this is where it starts to relate to the role of Christ in creation, the role of Christ in creation. Um, though we must concede the untenability of the position that this is the best of all possible worlds, full stop, in the absolute sense, or that God is compelled in any way to bring about the best of all possible worlds, there does remain a difficulty, a doubt. And it comes in the form of an apparent lack of fitness in light of what we know about the divine power and the divine generosity. So, if God is truly infinite in power, fecundity, generosity, then it would be very fitting for the cosmos, the created order, to be able to receive the fullness of divine glory in the greatest conceivable way according to its capacity to receive. Um, Now, we know that this has not happened purely in the created order, as we just got done talking about. But is there another way in which it has been fulfilled, or in which it could be fulfilled? As Christians, I think we ultimately have to answer yes to this question, and it's the doctrine of the incarnation which holds the key to articulating this mystery. That in the incarnate Word, in the very person of Jesus himself, What you have is the best of all possible worlds within him. In other words, Jesus Christ himself is the best of all possible worlds. And the reason is because it is in Christ that, first things first, the entire cosmos, it can be elevated into a state of deification in the first place. As various church fathers like Gregory and Maximus the Confessors, and medieval doctors like Bonaventure and Robert Grosseteste and Scotus, and even Thomas Aquinas, they point out that human nature itself is a microcosm of the cosmos. We're already talking about a little world, a minor mundi. And Pope Gregory the Great points this out when he says, quote, "For he has being in common with the stones, living in common with trees," he's talking about man, sensing in common with animals, and understanding in common with the angels. If man, therefore, has something in common with all creatures, then in a sense man is every creature," unquote. Therefore, when the Logos takes upon himself a human nature, he's already deifying a minor mundi, a little world within himself, in a self-contained kind of a way. And yet, when one merely considers human nature as such, given the principles we articulated earlier, of course, man is still not the best of all possible worlds. He's still not the best of all possible worlds from the standpoint of human nature itself, seeing as he occupies in his spirituality the lowest place among spiritual creatures generally. Therefore, for that reason, as the Dominican theologian Edward Hugon puts it, quote, this is a bit of a long quote, but it's important. He says, quote, "There would need to be some world that is both body or matter and God, man and God, spirit and God. Now that world is not only an ideal but a reality, Jesus Christ. In him, as the apostle testifies, God renewed all things, whereas the Greek text has it, God made a recapitulation of all things. He first recapitulated the material world. The human body is the ideal among inferior bodies, but the exemplar of the human body is the body of Jesus Christ. In the body of his Son, therefore, God renewed all things. Now, in the soul of Christ are recapitulated both the human world and the angelic world. For his most holy soul has all the perfections of all men and gathers within itself greater knowledge and grace than all the angels together. In Christ, therefore, the three worlds are summarized. They are, in fact, joined together with the divine and archetypal world itself, and form one world with it through the hypostatic union. For in Christ, divinity, soul, and body subsist in one person. Christ, therefore, is the most perfect world, in which all worlds are made one, that is, in the person, unquote. Now, it must be stressed, of course, that, purely considering human nature itself, the greatest of all worlds is not yet achieved. So even considering the human nature of Christ, and then this is pointed out by uh, the Dominican priest I just quoted, but just emphasizing this point, and I'll quote St. Thomas here when he says, quote, "The divine nature is united to the human nature in the person of Christ, that it is impossible that God could have made a creature greater or better than Christ," unquote. So here it's talking about by virtue of the hypostatic union, and yet this also doesn't just reduce to mere trivially true banality, right? I mean, of course, because he's God, he's going to be the greatest. Um, and the reason for that is because Jesus Christ, he did take upon himself a microcosm, a little world within himself. And because he did that, Christianity is able to simultaneously profess the divine omnipotence and sovereignty on the one hand, because it evades the conclusions that we were trying to avoid earlier, while also doing justice to the infinite love and generosity of God himself, who, given who he is, we can say, would most fittingly chart a path for the wonders and the glories of creation to reach its maximum degree of perfection. And furthermore, the exalted status of Jesus Christ, it also that we're talking about here, it also helps to add more depth to that initial question about the greatest of all possible worlds, the best of all possible worlds, even as it relates entirely to the created order. For while God could have created a better world than the one that he did create, it cannot be maintained, per the opinion of St. Thomas, that God could have created a more wisely created or ordered world. And St. Thomas makes this point when he says, quote, "The universe, the present creation being supposed, cannot be better on account of the most beautiful order given to things by God, in which the good of the universe consists. For, if any one thing were bettered, the proportion of order would be destroyed, as if one string were stretched more than it ought to be, the melody of the harp would be destroyed. Yet God could make other things or add something to the present creation, and then there would be another or better universe," unquote. So that's just drawing a distinction here between the sense in which the created world could be better and the sense in which it couldn't. And I think what most clearly exemplifies and illustrates this more nuanced take on the issue is precisely the incarnation, path, and passion, death, and resurrection of the person of Jesus Christ, the best of all possible worlds in himself, and our gateway into participating intimately within that best of all possible worlds by grace and according to our capacity to receive and cooperate with this grace. And so Jesus Christ in his own person is the best of all possible worlds. In his very person, Christ unites the lowest with the highest, and he provides for the elevation of the lowest into the highest by way of divine condensation. So while the world in which we inhabit, the world in which we live and move and have our being, could have been improved upon, and so in that sense, this is not the best of all possible worlds, yet in another very important sense, Jesus Christ, within himself, within his own person, he is the most perfect universe within himself. He is the best of all possible worlds. He is the unification of divinity and the microcosm of the cosmos within himself in this self contained way. And we are able to participate in the best of all possible worlds. And so Christianity is able to uh, answer this paradox for us, right, between God's omnipotence and sovereignty and freedom, and what would be the most fitting expression of his infinite generosity and love. And this is true just with the doctrine of the incarnation itself. It's true with the passion and resurrection of Christ, the paschal mystery. Christianity is always in the business, I think, of answering otherwise insoluble paradoxes. So that's what I have. Like I said, if you like the video, hit the like button, leave a comment, let me know what you think. And if you want to support my work, if you want to help me keep making videos and keep putting out content, Patreon is a wonderful way to do it. And God bless all of you. I'll see you in the next one. I'll be making more content all throughout the coming months and beyond. God bless you.